Welcome to the Grinders Table, the podcast where we sit with C-suite executives and founders who are taking their industry by storm to figure out how you can build an exceptional career and business. Together, we'll try to uncover how they are both defying the odds and what you can learn from their experience. Hello, everyone. I'm really excited about today's episode because I have someone I've been, hoping to speak to for a while. But I'm not going to do the intros. I'll allow her to do the intros. So, Anta, will you introduce yourself?
Thank you so much, UM, and thank you so much for having me. Hi guys, very happy to be here today. So, I'm Anta. I'm 30 and I'm actually French and also Senegalese. I currently work as the Rockery Manager Africa at BPIFrance, that is the French Public Investment Bank.
Huh. So, tell us that journey to BPI France. How did you get there? Because I know to attain such a position at 30, it sounds like you really had to put a lot into it, into building your career.
Yes, so it's actually funny that you ask, and it's really I had a whole other journey. I would say at the beginning, I when I was little, I actually wanted to work at the UN, and I worked really hard for that. So I thought, because I wanted to actually have an impact on African economies, and I thought, what organization actually has one of the biggest impact with the global reach, the UN. So I kind of decided at the time that it was my goal. And then at I think I was 23, I actually reached that goal. So I was happy. I worked at the UN, and I was working at the French permanent mission to the UN in New York, negotiating resolution texts on human rights and social affairs. So it was really interesting, and I've learned so much. But I've also understood that change through text resolution was so incremental and very complicated because of the consensus system. So you actually have 193 countries that need to agree on issue, for which they have completely different views on because of cultural, economic, and political factors. So it was like really, I would say, you know um, like great that I reached this goal, but at the same time, I just discovered that it was actually not what I really wanted to do, and I was lost. I was like, what I'm gonna do, and I remember at that time I was actually going to a lot of conferences and tech conferences around tech ecosystem, and at the same time I was reading a lot of reports and articles around tech in Africa, and I remember that I read this article that was saying basically that according to the World Bank, African population faced challenges to develop because they didn't have bank account, and M-Pesa arrived in 2007 and said they didn't have bank account, but they had mobile. So they launched mobile money. And I was like literally fascinated by this bottom up approach, where basically we try to solve a problem, on the local market, and then we scale it regionally and then globally. And you know that better than me. But this approach, the fact that it was completely different from the top bottom approach that you find in international organization, and that it's also an approach that was really empowering for African entrepreneurs. And so after that, I just said that I really wanted to see it from my own eyes. So I went to South Africa for a little less than a years, and I work also in basically building the French tech ecosystem there. We were launching it actually, and working with South African entrepreneurs, and I was really fascinated in to see how creative and talented they were, and that's what I knew actually, that I wanted to support entrepreneurs and tech ecosystem in Africa, and that it's through tech that we'll be able to have a huge impact on African population empowerment.
Wow, wow. That's actually an interesting career. You should write a book. Uh, Talking about tech and using tech to lift the African continent out of poverty and using tech to enrich the lives of people. What exactly fascinates you about tech? Because tech is the buzz thing now. Everybody is going into tech. Everybody wants their children to study, to be a programmer, or go into tech. What exactly is tech about tech that tell me what fascinates you about tech?
I think what is fascinating is really that it's like it's really, everybody can actually have access to it. Now that we have the internet, we have so many resources now that are available. There's like a lot of even like, coding schools. So it's like everybody can actually access it, and you don't need to do like a lot of studies, or I mean, for sure that helps, but you can, if you're creative, if you're passionate, you can actually, make it. And that's actually what I love. Like when I was in South Africa, and I was so surprised that I saw that so many young people was, unemployed. It was hard for them to get a job, and it was just they just launched a company just after the university. They was like, oh no, it's okay, we're going to launch a company, and some of them actually really succeeded. And that's what I love. It's a very kind of like democratized approach.
True, true. And I think the mistake everybody or a lot of people make is thinking tech is just software, right? Tech is just writing code. But there are so many non-tech tech roles that are people are thriving with across Africa. So I'm going to go quite personal. Can you tell me one time you failed and how did you bounce back from that failure?
Yeah, definitely. So I actually, it's really personal. So I actually lost the sight on one of my left eyes actually,
Hmm.
and which was actually very what is actually very ironic, because I think I was so dazzled by the New York City, that's the reason that I lost my sight. Because so basically I was between two jobs in New York, so transitioning from working as a tech advisor at the French consulate in New York, to working as a business developer at a cybersecurity startup. And I went to Paris in between. And when I went to see an ophthalmologist, he told me that if I did not get surgery the next morning, I might lose my sight. And so I did the surgery and I did the follow up in New York, but I lost the sight eventually. So I actually learned
Oh.
a big lesson here, because I think I was dazzled by New York, but I was also so stressed out to let the startup that I worked for, that I was supposed to work for, and that I worked for at the end, down, because they really needed to fill the position at the time. And that I actually left no I left for New York while I actually should have stayed in France. And so sometimes we always put work first, we always want to, reach our goal and everything, but we need to always remember that health comes first, and without health we can't do anything. So, and I paid the high price because I'll never get my sight back on the left eye.
It's so terrible to hear that. I'm so sorry about that. And interestingly, I hear oftentimes high flying individuals, either in career or business, have one sad story or the other around how they sacrifice their health for their work. And I think that we need to start changing. We need to start taking our health very important because health
Yeah.
is wealth eventually. And this takes me to my next question about work-life balance because it's closely tied to health.
Mhm.
How do you currently approach work-life balance, and how would you advise the listeners to approach work-life balance? Because my own perspective is I don't think that there is necessarily a balance. There will ever be a balance. Sometimes you focus on one thing, you have more focus on one than the other. Sometimes you have to focus on the other, right? But what are your thoughts on this?
I think that's an excellent question, because I think I still struggle with that. And I think because of my education. So in France, I did what we call a classe prépa. So it's like really high training for after to enter kind of like Ivy League school in France. And it was like so we like work really really a lot, but what we teach you, it's actually it's good to work like crazy, and that it's like the more you work the better. And I kind of like, I would say, I kind of like integrated this into my system. And whenever I have a work, and also usually work that require, I would say, large amount of like, really large amount of work, I was like almost killing myself to work, and but to the extent that I was not able to measure where when actually my, I might, do a burnout basically. So I was really that to a point that it was not really good for my health. And I think I'm now it's a little bit better. So I'm still, in the learning process, and I try to kind of like organize my schedule. I'm always like kind of like testing and learning, So I'm trying, for instance, this new thing now where I always put like call only in the morning, and in the afternoon I put no calls, except if there's like some emergency and so on. I try also to really organize myself even better, to delegate more. Also, I would say with my team, So yeah, still learning here, but yeah.
Yeah, I guess we're all learning, and this might sound like a cliche question, but you're thriving in a world that is male dominated, in an industry that is male dominated. Um, what are your motivations and mantra that have pushed you to, be the best that you are right now?
That's a very good question. I think it's also maybe linked to, being a Black woman in France and in a Western country, that is something that is definitely from the beginning push you to do the best, because you kind of have, your parents expect you to do good, and you also kind of like after, set up this bar, I would say very high for you to reach. So you always have this thing. I mean, I've always had this thing to be the best of what I wanted to be, and kind of like prove wrong to whoever other people, I would say, French people or other that were not considering us as legit, I would say, as citizen and so on, to prove them that it's possible and that we could do a lot of things.
Huh. What are your thoughts around mentorship? Do you have a mentor, or do you have mentors?
Yes, I actually have many mentors, and to be honest, that they actually have been helping me through all my career. Like every time I got an experience that it's, when I was in the French consulate, even in South Africa and so on, I always had actually a mentor that kind of like pushed me to do better. And I still have those mentors. And what is great is that I always kind of, when I have a question or when there's specific things I need answer on, and they always hear from me. So I think mentorship is really great, and it's completely changed the direction where you may go, and also the way you learn.
Wow. You've all been listening to Anta Diallo, and she's really shared so many amazing tips for growth, whether you're in a career or in business. We're going to end with two questions. The first one would be, what are the recommended books or newsletters or podcasts that you want to share?
Yeah, definitely. So there's a book that I really like, and I actually reread it last summer. It's called Amkulel the Fula Boy from Amadou Ampateba. So Amadou Ampateba is was actually one of the most important writer of the 20th century in Francophone Africa. And basically, in his book, he writes about his youth during the aftermath of war between the Fula and Tukulur people, and also the installation of French colonialism. And this book resonated so much with me, specifically at that time last summer when I was doing this whole trip to Senegal to connect deeper with my roots. First of all, because I'm partly Fula, and also I think the way he navigates through the duality of his identities and value between, the oral tradition of his family life and Muslim education on one hand, but also on the other hand, his French education. So it's really great. And also at the same time, he tells the story of his life before colonialism, what we don't find much in our history books. So I really recommend this book. I think it's an amazing book. As a newsletter, I read a lot Baobab Insights from the Baobab networks. I actually love it because there's always, lots of like the way it's structured. It's very synthetic, very also always relevant information, lots of sources. You have always, some great reports out there that they put. You have sometimes focus on regions or vertical or a startup spotlight. So I really kind of like get a digest, I would say, of news on that newsletter. And in terms of podcast, I really love Invest in the Future by Future in Africa. I think they always interview, great founders and investors. And I like the approach of like, the storytelling approach, like it's very inspirational. And we kind of also understand, how those amazing people start their ventures.
Mhm. All right. And the last question I have for you, I'm so sad we have to end this, is can you give us three insights or advice from your business or career? Three things that anybody can take from this conversation.
Oh, sure, definitely. The first one is actually take the time to find your real professional goal that will drive you, and don't be afraid to test and learn. Because so often I've seen around in my circle that people don't really ask themselves the question early enough, what do I really want? What drives me? And then they realize 5 to 10 years of career after that what they're doing is not really what they want. And actually through my experience, I've tried to have this test and learn approach, meaning testing an interest, see if it suit me or not, and then kind of validating or not the initial idea. Because of course, the idea you have of a job might actually not be what it really is. And I would really actually, encourage young people to use experience like internship to do so, because it's really the chance to do so, I think. And sometimes people in my resume say, "Oh, you do so many different things that it looks like it doesn't make sense," but for me, it makes definitely sense because I was always testing and learning and say, "Oh, yes, oh no." So that's definitely the first thing. The second thing I'm thinking of is be conscious of your value and your strengths. Because I realize, and especially, in Western countries, when you're minorities, that we sometimes unconsciously undermine ourselves and we are not conscious of how much value we can bring to the table. And I th- I think, on my side, I would have not been fully aware of that if I stayed in France. And the first time I realized that is when I was at the UN, and I understood that being from different cultures, speaking different languages, and also being a female enable me to easier navigate through the negotiation of resolution text between the different regional groups. And then so the last one would be confident, or if you're not, pretend you are confident. So I know that it's something that we see every day now and everywhere, but it's 100% true. It's like, it's the fake it until you make it. And because the more confident you look, the more people are going to trust you. And so the more you actually going to trust yourself. And funny story is that I actually have a friend from business school who's passionate about theater. And when we were in business school, she decided to pretend she was a saleswoman and decided to get a job in sales. And she took this job as if it was a role in a play. And now she's one of the top saleswoman in Cisco, earning a three-figure salary. So it works.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. I really hope that we get to have this conversation sometime again or have drinks in person.
Definitely.
Yeah, you're such an amazing person. Thank you for taking your time to talk to us. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much, Iwan. Me too. Thank you for having me.
That's all on today's episode of The Grinders Table, and thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at MonsieurOM. That's at Monsieur for Miss Time French OM. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.